Zen Buddhism by the numbers, number 8, the Eightfold Path. Right Livelihood. An excerpt from Dogen Zenji's Instructions to the Tenzo. Zen monasteries have traditionally had 6 officers who are all Buddha's disciples and all share in guiding the activity of awakening. Among them, the Tenzo is responsible for preparing meals for the monks. Regulations for the Zen monastery states, in order to make reverential offerings to monks, there is a position called Tenzo. Since ancient times, this position has been held by accomplished monks who have way-seeking mind, or by senior disciples with an aspiration for enlightenment. This is so because the position requires wholehearted practice. Those entrusted with this work, but who lack the way-seeking mind, will only cause and endure hardship despite all their efforts. During my stay at Mount Tiantong, a priest named Yang from Qingguan Prefecture held the position of Tenzo. One day after the noon meal, when I was walking along the eastern corridor to a sub-temple called Chaoran Hut, he was in front of the Buddha hall drying some mushrooms in the sun. He had a bamboo stick in his hand and no hat on his head. The sun was very hot, scorching the paving stones. It looked very painful. His backbone was bent like a bow, and his eyebrows were as white as the feathers of a crane. I went up to the Tenzo and asked, "How long have you been a monk?" 68 years, he replied. "Why don't you let a helper do it for you?" "Other people are not me." "Venerable sir, I can see how you follow the way through your work. But still, why do this now when the sun is so hot? If not now, when?" There was nothing else to say. As I was walking further along the eastern corridor, I was moved by how important the work of the Tenzo is. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So, Martin Luther King Jr., great Bodhisattva. This training that we have undertaken in the Mahayana tradition is training in bodhisattvahood. That's the point of the training. What does it mean to be a bodhisattva? As I mentioned in the opening remarks last night, the great vows for all are not just words that we recite. That short chant is the blueprint for our practice. And it's so mysterious. It seems so lofty and unattainable. But this is what we have signed up for when we entered the temple. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to save them all. What does that mean? To save all beings. It's just moment by moment. Right? Livelihood is a very important part of that. Not just how you earn your living, but how you do what you do. Whatever your job is, here in the Zendo, to be an officer, when to strike the inkin, when to strike the gong, when to strike the densho, when to light the candle, when to extinguish the candle, when to fill the tea bowl for the Buddha, or the tea bowl on the ancestor's altar. These things are very important. And they're important not because each individual action is important, but because each individual action has an effect on the community as a whole. And each job, each action within your role as an officer impacts the next action that the next officer is going to have to take. We take our cues from each other. If one cue is missing, we don't know what to do. If a cue is late, it creates disharmony. And it's all of our responsibilities. And for those who don't have an officer role, you're not without responsibility either. Your responsibility is to maintain the session atmosphere, to keep the mind active, engaged. Keep your body active and engaged. Keep your energy up. Keep your spirit up. Because your spirit is what everyone else will feed off of. You are the bodhisattva who is saving all beings. Your spirit matters. Your activity matters. I called Martin Luther King a great American bodhisattva. Of course, he was not a Buddhist, but that doesn't matter at all. His activity from the time that he first entered his ministry was seeking to liberate all beings, not just the blacks in the deep South who had to suffer the indignity of segregation and Jim Crow laws and the Ku Klux Klan and the injustices of not being able to vote and paying taxes to support a government that had no interest in helping them. Not just to liberate them, but to liberate white people from the burden of their prejudices, the burden of their hatred, the awful price to their soul that they each had to pay. To liberate all beings, not just one group pitted against another group, but all beings. The oppressor is oppressed by the weight of having to take the role of oppressor, by having to degrade and deform their soul by taking the attitude of superiority and intolerance. He worked hard to liberate people, and he paid the price many times. He went to jail over a dozen times. He had his home firebombed with his wife and children inside. He had his phone tapped. He was under constant surveillance by the FBI. And of course, eventually he paid with his life. The way of the Bodhisattva is not for the faint of heart. You have to have a bold spirit and universal love. That is why we honor him. And the fight goes on. For each 2 steps forwards, there's a step backwards, and sometimes 2 steps backwards. And speaking of right livelihood, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. And what he was doing in Memphis, he was there to support the Memphis sanitation workers who were on strike. He went there because livelihood is an essential part of our spiritual being. Without being able to work safely and for a decent wage, and with the respect that labor is entitled to, we're less than human. And those who would keep human beings from being able to work safely and for a decent wage, they are less than human also. Martin Luther King was moving in the direction away from working primarily for civil rights and towards working for economic rights, the right to work, the right to a guaranteed minimum income, which is an idea which was very radical at the time and is still radical. You talk about a guaranteed minimum income and people don't know what you're talking about. You mean just giving people money to live? That's such a strange idea. But that idea is going to be kicked around very much in the coming decades as AI throws so many people out of work. We may be entering a time when work will be optional, but the economic necessity will be mandatory. And what do we do then? So a great bodhisattva, Martin Luther King, had a great respect for the working person and a great compassion for everything that the working person had to withstand. Dogen's original exposure to Zen was in the Rinzai school. So I've spoken about Dogen a number of times, so some of you may already know this biographical information, and if so, just be patient. He was born in 1200, actually born January 26th in the year 1200. So right at the start of the 13th century. And he lived 53 years, so he died in mid-century. He was the son of a official in the imperial court. So he came from a powerful family, but he was an illegitimate son. So he didn't have the status that you might assume from his parenthood. And he became an orphan at a very young age. His mother died when he was 7. He was raised first by his older brother and then by an uncle. And when he was 12, he was ordained in the Tendai sect. The Tendai sect was the most powerful and influential sect of Buddhism in Japan at that time. So he was ordained at 12 years old, and there was something in the Tendai sect teaching that troubled him greatly. And we talk about it also in the Song of Zazen. Sentient beings are fundamentally all Buddhas. That's also a teaching of the Tendai sect. And his question, which nobody could answer for him, was, well, if we're fundamentally all Buddhas, why do we have to practice? If we've already got it, why don't we know we've got it? Why do we feel so crappy if we're actually Buddhas? And nobody could really answer him. And finally, when they got tired of trying to answer his questions, one of the Tendai priests said, well, maybe those Zen folks can help you out with that. And so he went to study with a Rinzai Zen master named Myozen, who was the successor of Eisai, who was the ancestor who brought Rinzai Zen to Japan in the 12th century. So he studied with Myozen, but Myozen couldn't really satisfy him either. And Dogen apparently got under Myozen's skin enough that Myozen said, well, why don't we both go over to China? Maybe we'll find an answer there. So they went over to China. This was in 1223, so Dogen was 23 years old. He'd already been a monk for 11 years, but was not satisfied with any of the answers he was getting and felt like he really had to get to the bottom of this question. So he goes over with Myozen, and they first study with a Rinzai teacher for a couple of years. And Dogen, being the genius that he is, passes all these koans, and the Rinzai teacher is saying, well, you know, I don't really have anything more to teach you. I can give you transmission. And Dogen's like, no. I'm still not settled. What am I going to get transmission for? So he goes to study with a Soto teacher. And this is in 1225. And in a couple of years, he has broken through, and he says he's dropped body and mind. And he feels that he has answered finally all his questions. And so the Soto teacher gives him transmission. And a couple of years later, he returns to Japan, where he immediately gets in trouble with the Tendai sect. He's answered all of his own questions, but the answers don't happen to coincide with the Tendai way of doing things. He writes his treatise on how to do Zazen and why Zazen is the best practice of all, and really that's all you have to do is lots of Zazen. And he gets in trouble with the Tendai sect, and they essentially tell him, you know, keep moving on, go away. And he founds his own temple outside of Kyoto. And then a while later, he goes off to the mountains and founds the temple that he's known for, Eihai, where he stays until his death. So that's Dogen's history in a nutshell. And I find Dogen really fascinating. His writings are not easy. This text, the Instructions to the Tenzo, is one of the easiest of all of the Dogen texts, but if you try reading the Shobo-genzo, it's similar in feeling to reading Bodhidharma or Rinzai, in that each sentence and each paragraph can be its own koan. You can just sink right into there and spend days or weeks with a single paragraph. Very rich, very provocative. Instructions to the Tenzo is more of a manual of how the Tenzo office should be handled. But he does talk a lot about his experiences with Tenzos in China and what he learned from them. And this text is taken from that. So getting back to the text, Zen monasteries have traditionally had 6 officers who are all Buddha's disciples. and all share in guiding the activity of awakening. So what does this have to do with livelihood? The traditional teaching on livelihood, the pre-Zen teaching, the Theravadan teaching, is basically there are certain professions that you have to avoid. You can't trade in weapons, you can't trade in meat, so you can't be an arms dealer, you can't be a butcher, you can't trade in human beings or other beings, you can't be a sex trafficker or an enslaver. You can't, what else? You can't be a drug pusher. You can't trade in intoxicants. So there are a bunch of things that there's no redeeming these professions. You just have to stay away from them. And there's an underlying sense of your profession should be one in which you can behave honorably. Your profession should never injure your sense of integrity. It should never contradict the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, or any of the sutras. And the Zen tradition kind of assumes all of that without ever saying it. But the emphasis on livelihood in the Mahayana tradition, because Mahayana is training in being a bodhisattva, the main aim of livelihood is to enlighten others, to help others, to free others in whatever way you can, to be of service. That's one side of it. And then the other side of it is that work is practice. It's not you go into the Zendo and you do your Zazen and you do your chanting and then you go out and make a fortune on Wall Street or whatever. Your work is practice. So you have to be able to bring the way-seeking mind to your work. The way-seeking mind, the mind of enlightenment. For Dogen, there's no separation between Zazen and enlightenment, work and enlightenment. Work is practice. Practice is enlightenment. To practice wholeheartedly is to awaken all beings. To practice with a clear mind and complete presence. To chop wood with a straightforward mind and nothing behind it is practice, is enlightenment. There's no division. Right livelihood is right practice. Right practice is fulfillment of the Bodhisattva's vow. Zen monasteries have traditionally had 6 officers, and they all share in guiding the activity of awakening. That is the role of an officer. The role of an officer may be to strike the gong at the right moment, or hit the clappers at the right moment, or light the candle at the right moment, or extinguish the candle at the right moment. But actually, Their role is guiding the activity of awakening. Among them, the Tenzo is responsible for preparing meals for the monks, regulations for the Zen monastery. It's a regulations for the Zen monastery is actually not like a little pamphlet that is passed around where they have the rules and regulations for monastery. It's a 10-volume tome of rules and regulations establishing how monasteries are to function, and it's incredibly detailed, as you might imagine, how everything is supposed to work. And this was printed in China from it was written by someone named Zhanglu Zhangji. The Japanese version of the name is Choro Sasaku, and it was published in 1103, so about a century before Dogen appeared on the scene. Dogen then took all of those rules and regulations for the monastery, and when he went back to Japan, wrote his own book of rules and regulations for the monastery. Dogen was a really prolific writer. It's amazing in the short life that he had, from the time that he came back from China in 1227 to the time that he died in 1253. It's only, 36 years? 26 years. In 26 years, he wrote the Shobo-genzo. He wrote a collection of koans with commentaries, which is almost as long as the Shobo-genzo. He wrote innumerable poems, and he wrote this long text on incredibly detailed instructions on how a monastery is to function, with all of the ways that the monks are supposed to act. So this regulations for the Zen monastery states, in order to make reverential offerings to monks, there's a position called Tenzo. I love that line. In order to make reverential offerings to monks. You remember in the Diamond Sutra where the Buddha is recalling all of his past lives and all of the Buddhas that he's served throughout the innumerable past lives that he had, and he was serving all these Buddhas. That's essentially what this regulation for the Zen monastery is saying. The Tenzo's not there to just make a soup or a nice salad. They're there to make offerings to these Buddhas, these monks. It is the job of the Tenzo to make reverential offerings, to serve the bodhisattvas. A bodhisattva serving bodhisattvas. And in this way, fulfilling their role as bodhisattva. Since ancient times, this position has been held by accomplished monks who have way-seeking mind, or by senior disciples with an aspiration for enlightenment. This really gets to the heart of how important it is to bring your practice into your work. The position of Tenzo is so important. It's such a vital role. You are making reverential offerings. You are feeding the Buddha. You are encouraging and guiding and holding tenderly the bodhisattvas of the Sangha, promoting their work, promoting their effort to enlighten all beings. It's incredibly important. And he says, this is so because the position requires wholehearted practice. Work and practice are not two separate things. Wholehearted practice is the expression of enlightenment. Wholehearted work, putting all of your effort, your mind, your body, your heart, into your work. This is, however inexhaustible delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. Those entrusted with this work, but who lack the way-seeking mind, those who are not sincere, those who are not fully committed to enlightening all beings, will only cause and endure hardship despite all their efforts. They will harm themselves and they will harm others. It takes pure practice, pure dedication. What is pure practice and pure dedication? It's giving it your all. You may make mistakes, and that's to be expected if you're in a position that is so unfamiliar to you. Of course you'll make mistakes, but the attitude that you have, the desire to be of benefit, not the desire to be perfect, but the desire to create harmony, to create the conditions for the awakening of all of your fellow Sangha members. That's what counts. That's what counts. If you've never been Ino or Gyorin or Joke or Jikijutsu, or you've only been once and you kind of maybe sort of remember but not really, of course you'll make mistakes, and that's okay. But that desire to be of service, that desire to do your job with a pure heart and pure dedication, and to let the mistakes go and not obsess over them because you're going to have another chance. This is right livelihood. To give it your all. Not for your sake, not for your ego, but because this is the way to help guide the activity of awakening. The instructions to the Tenzo it's not overly long, but it goes on for about 12 or 13 pages. So of course I had to choose just portions of it to excerpt. And this is a story which is not part of the excerpt that I've read for the Dharma talk, but I really like it and I'd like to share it with you. So Dogen says, in May of 1223, this was probably when he first arrived in China, 1223. He was 23 years old. I was staying aboard the ship at Qingyuan. Once I was speaking with the captain when a monk about 60 years of age came aboard to buy mushrooms from the ship's Japanese merchants. I asked him to have tea with me and asked where he was from. He was the Tenzo from Ayuangshan. He said, "I come from Jishu, but it is now 40 years since I've left there, and I'm now 61. I've practiced in several monasteries. When the Venerable Dao Quan became abbot at Guyun Temple of Ayuan, I went there, but just idled the time away, not knowing what I was doing. Fortunately, I was appointed Tenzo last year." He's in his 60s. Just last year, he finally got to the point where he got this position of respect, Tenzo. "I was appointed Tenzo last year when the summer training period ended. Tomorrow is May 5th, the Chinese Dragon Boat Festival, but I don't have any special offerings for the monks. So I thought I'd make a nice noodle soup for them. We didn't have any mushrooms, so I came here to give the monks something from the 10 directions." "When did you leave Ayangwashang?" I asked. "After the noon meal." "How far is it from here?" "Around 12 miles. "When are you going back to the monastery?" "As soon as I've bought the mushrooms." I said, "As we have had the unexpected opportunity to meet and talk like this today, I would like you to stay a little while longer and allow me to offer Zen Master Tenzo a meal." "Oh, I'm sorry, but I just can't. If I'm not there to prepare tomorrow's meal, it won't go well." "But surely someone else in the monastery knows how to cook. If you're not there, it can't make that much difference to everyone." I have been given this responsibility in my old age, and it is this old man's practice. How can I leave to others what I should do myself? As well, when I left, I didn't ask for permission to be gone overnight. Now he's over 60 and he's walked 12 miles to the ship to buy mushrooms for the soup. And he has to walk back another 12 miles. Dogen is tempting him to stay. "Venerable Sir, why put yourself to the difficulty of working as a cook in your old age? Why not just do Zazen and study the koan of the ancient masters?" The Tenzo laughed for a long time. And then he said, "My foreign friend, it seems you don't really understand practice or the words of the ancients." Hearing this elder monk's words, I felt ashamed and surprised. I asked, "What is practice? What are words?" The Tenzo said, "Keep asking and penetrate this question, and then you will be someone who understands." But I didn't know what he was talking about. And so the Tenzo said, "If you don't understand, then come and see me at Ayuangshan sometime. We'll talk about the meaning of words." Having said this, he stood up and said, "It'll be getting dark soon. I'd best hurry." And he left. In July of the same year, I was staying at Tiantangshan when the Tenzo of Ayuangshan came to me and said, "After the summer training period is over, I'm going to retire as Tenzo and go back to my native region. I heard from a fellow monk that you were here, and so I came to see how you were making out." I was overjoyed. I served him tea as we sat down to talk. When I brought up our discussion on the ship about words and practice, the Tenzo said, "If you want to understand words, you must look into what words are. If you want to practice, you must understand what practice is." I asked, "What are words?" The Tenzo said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I asked again, "What is practice?" Everywhere. Nothing is hidden. You see, one of the most influential teachers for Dogen was a Tenzo. From the Tenzo, he learned what practice is. So this is the story of another Tenzo. During my stay at Mount Tiantong, a priest named Yang from Qingyuan Prefecture held the position of Tenzo. One day after the noon meal, when I was walking along the eastern corridor to a sub-temple called Chaoran Hut, he was in front of the Buddha hall drying some mushrooms in the sun. He had a bamboo stick in his hand and no hat on his head. The sun was very hot, scorching the paving stones. It looked very painful. His backbone was bent like a bow, and his eyebrows were as white as the feathers of a crane. I went up to the Tenzo and asked, "How long have you been a monk?" 68 years, he replied. So if he's been a monk for 68 years, how old is he? Maybe 80? Or in his 80s? "Why don't you let a helper do it for you?" Other people are not me. No one can practice for you. No one can do it for you. No one can have the experience of waking up for you. Other people are not me. Venerable Sir, I can see how you follow the way through your work. But still, why do this now when the sun is so hot? If not now, when? It's never a convenient time. It's never a convenient time to do zazen. It's never a convenient time to give your all, to give 100%. It's never a convenient time to be Tenzo. It's never a convenient time to be Joke. It's never a convenient time to be Jisha. The work is thrust upon you, and you have to do your best. You have to do everything you can to foster the awakening of the community. If not now, when? Sure, it's hot. Sure, I'm sweating. The stones are hot. But that's when the mushrooms dry. You don't put them out at night to dry when it's nice and cool. You don't wait until it's cloudy outside to dry them. You do it when it's hot. You do it at the moment. It may not be convenient. It may be painful. Waking up is very painful. Pain is your teacher. Waking up just tears you up. If not now, when?